Hi, I'm Adri. This is Imperfectionates, and we're here for no special reason at all. There's no occasion that we're here for. JK, it's my soccer birthday. I know it's a little belated. It's actually day of my birthday right now as I'm recording. I tried to record last weekend so I could have it like posted for soccer birthday, but my mic died 5 minutes in and I recorded for an hour and a half with no audio. So, but it's okay. It's for the best. Looking on the bright side, because my first recording, I didn't have a cute little birthday bag full of socks. I did not have a birthday crown, and I did not have birthday bunting. So we're making a real celebration of it this time. You may be asking yourself, what is a sock birthday? I recognize some parts of that word. Well, thank you for asking. It is my sock knitting anniversary because 1 year ago yesterday, I cast on my first ever pair of socks, and it is also my birthday today. I'm turning 28. And so, since these occasions happen at the same time, we're celebrating them together. And so, we're combining into one massive, wonderful soccer birthday holiday. And how do you celebrate holidays? With a parade. And what is a parade in knitting? But I'm going to show you all my socks. It's a sock parade. It's a soccer birthday sock parade. I don't think we're going to get through everything today because there's quite a lot. This bag is full, and so we're just gonna go until either I lose my voice, we start to lose the light, or people start getting here for my birthday. And we're just gonna yap about all my socks until then. And I don't want to just like show you sock, show you sock. I'm gonna tell you everything that I can about it. I'm gonna tell you what yarn I used. I'm gonna tell you how I made it. I'm gonna tell you like cute memories I have with some of these. I'm gonna tell you lessons I learned. We're getting into it. This is my favorite type of video to watch. So I hope that I'm not the only one who just wants to sit and watch hours and hours of people talk in detail about socks. Autism who? So before we get started, we've got in this bag and then some behind me all of the socks I've knit in the last year, my first year of sock knitting. I want you to make a guess in the comments. Don't cheat. Don't cheat by checking my Ravelry. Just go in the comments and write down your guess for how many pairs of socks you think I've knit in my first ever year of sock knitting. Okay, are we ready? Is it time to, are we gonna get started? Okay, let's jump into it. Bag is in front of me. Let's move bag to the side of me. We begin, as you always should, with the basics, that being the I'm So Basic sock pattern by Summer Lee. Even from the very, very beginning, I was not a rule follower, and so despite everything the pattern said, I knit these on US 2 needles. I knit them with Peyton's Croy yarn, which is a little thicker, which is one of the reasons I use the US 2 needles. And rather than knitting them on the size recommended for my foot size, like 9 inches, I knit them on 56 stitches because of the thicker yarn and the bigger needles, and these actually fit really well. I knit these with a heel flap and gusset and with a 2x1 ribbed cuff because I was still following Summer Lee's pattern in that regard at least, though I knit them a lot shorter than the pattern called for. Even for my first socks, I knew that I was not going to want a super tall sock. So I made them this kind of like quarter crew size, which a lot of my socks, spoilers, will be. These socks were full of lessons because they were my first ever socks. So this is how I learned sock construction. It was also my first time doing magic loop, so I learned magic loop. And I learned kind of how to ladder back and fix decreases. I made a mistake on this one. I don't exactly remember what the mistake was, but I just noticed at one point that I had the wrong number of stitches. And so I went back to try to fix it, and I absolutely failed. Peyton's Croy is very splitty and like very fuzzy. Not the best yarn for a beginner to try and go fix a mistake in. But the next time I made a mistake while decreasing, I went back to try to fix it and I could. So I think that my mistakes here laid the groundwork for me to learn how to actually fix decreases later on. And despite knitting these a full year ago, I feel like I have the like strongest, fondest memories of knitting these socks because I brought these to the common with me when I went to go see Shakespeare on the Common last year for my birthday. One of my friends was visiting from out of town, and so we went with another friend from college and some of my friends not from college, and we went to the Boston Common and I knit these socks and we watched Shakespeare in the park and we ate Whole Foods strawberry shortcake, which I may or may not have some more of in the fridge for today. I love that cake. So these were where the journey began. Did I tell you what the yarn color was? I know I told you it was Peyton's Croy. The color is Celestial Colors. So that's sock number 1. Number 2, technically 2 was like a fighting position because these were not my second ever finished sock project, but they were my second cast on, and I was working on some other socks concurrently. But these are the ones that when I think of my second pair of socks, I think of these. I had such good luck with Summer Lee the first time, so I decided to go for Summer Lee again. This is the Sunny Side Up pattern from the Sock Project book. I had never knit any color work at all before this, and this seemed like a relatively beginner-friendly project. I did this on Magic Loop too. I also stuck with the 2x1 ribbing for this, and also stuck with the Peyton's Croy Celestial colors. Basically, when I was buying the yarn for these, I looked at the yardage estimate in the I'm So Basic sock pattern, and it said something like up to 400 something yards. And so I was like, oh, let me get 3 balls of the Celestial colors. And so I used like 1 ball and a tiny little bit for these. And then this one used up the rest of that second ball. So I still have a full ball of the Peyton's Croy Celestial colors ready to go whenever I have a project in mind for it. And I do have a project in mind for it. Not sure when we'll get to it, but it's been bookmarked in my mind. So Peyton's Croy Celestial colors, and then this is the Peyton's Croy Saltwater. and this is the Peyton Croix muslin. I once again use my US2 needles, basically because at this point, when I knit both of these, I only had US2 needles. They were the smallest size available in my ChowGo interchangeable set, and I didn't know yet whether I was going to like sock knitting, so I didn't want to invest in new tools until I knew, and so I was using what I had, which was the US2. I initially cast these on 64 stitches, but then I was trying to get them on over my heel, and I could, but they were pretty tight, and I wasn't sure, and I continued to knit a little more, and then because the US2 needles that I have are interchangeables, I hadn't tightened them between these socks, and partway through, the needle came unscrewed, and the stitches got like stuck in the join between the needle and cord, and it was just kind of nightmarish to try to fix. And I was like, you know what, this is a sign from the universe. I'm going to restart on 72 stitches, and that's what I did. And these ones have a little afterthought heel. Again, because these are so early in the sock knitting journey, I learned a lot from these. First of all, I learned stranded color work. I'd never done it before. I learned how to do a little like more rounded toe. These ones I used the standard wedge toe, and these ones, I don't know if you can see, they're like pretty big. And I realized when the socks are a little bit too long, the wedge toe looks really silly to me, and I think that the rounded toe looks a little more normal even if the socks don't have quite enough negative ease. And so this was when I started to kind of like develop my go-to toe recipe. I also gained from these the idea for what I call the second thought heel. Trademark that, but don't. Please go. Actually, the opposite of trademark that. I want you to make that popular. I want you to make that like as normal of a thing as an afterthought heel and a before thought heel. Like I want to go down in the knitting books for being the one who invented the second thought heel. Not really invented. Basically, these ended up slightly too big on the foot, and because it was my first time doing afterthought heels, I didn't quite get the heel placement right, and so the feet ended up too wide and too long. And at first I was like, it'll be fine, I'll just deal with it, but it was too wide and too long. So I decided to go back and undo one motif and then do the toe from there. And when doing that, I realized that there's no reason that you couldn't just do the heel when you're partway through the foot. That's why it's like second thought, because you're like, oh, on second thought, let me go and finish the heel real quick. Especially if you're using a contrasting color for the heel, you can basically just knit like a couple inches of the foot, go back and do the heel, and then try on the foot to get it the right length. And so though I didn't exactly do that for these, having to go back and realize that you can just kind of knit the foot once you've done the heel gave me the idea to start doing that when I'm doing afterthought heels in a contrasting color. And I also learned, because of how big these ended up on the foot, that I need to find a way when doing color work to decrease for the foot. I didn't actually figure out what I was going to do in practice until the next socks, but I figured out that it was a potential thing I was going to need to do, is find a way to decrease for the foot, especially on colorwork socks. Okay, number 3. And also note that number 3 I was doing concurrently with these. So if you're like, okay, you start with a basic vanilla sock, and then maybe you like expand to a super beginner colorwork type of sock. So surely the next step will be as reasonable of a progression. Reasonable, right? I know how to knit socks. I know how to knit stranded colorwork. So surely I can do an advanced all over colorwork with multiple 3-color rounds and very long floats. Obviously. These are my Stardew Valley socks. The patterns are from Oakwood Knits, and these are spring, the valley comes alive, and winter, the wind can be still. When I started to think about what I wanted to do for Christmas gifts last year, I have a friend and roommate who's really into Stardew Valley, and so I thought it would be really cute to make them a Stardew Valley inspired knit for Christmas. So I was just kind of browsing Ravelry looking at different Stardew Valley inspired patterns, and I came across these, and I just absolutely fell in love. But I also knew that I knew that these were going to be pretty advanced for what my skills were. So I figured I should make a kind of prototype for myself before going and making my roommate's gift knit. And also my roommate's birthday is right after Christmas. And so I figured I should make them 2 pairs of socks for Christmas and birthday. And so I did one of each for my own pair because I love a mismatch pair. And so I knit this one first and then this one. I'm not going to list out every single color of every yarn in this because that would be crazy. They are in my Ravelry in the project pages, and there's some combination of Knit Pick Stroll, Cascade Heritage, and Langia Wool. This one does a 1x1 rib, and it used an alternating cable cast on, which I haven't really used since, but I think it looks really clean. And I thought it'd be kind of cutesy to do this one called for a 2x2 cuff, but I thought to have this little bit of snow at the top in 1x1 would be kind of cute, and I stand by that. A yearish later, I think that's really cute. And then both of these started at, I believe, 80 stitches and then went down to 72 because they're pretty tall, so the calf starts to get chunky, and so you need a little bit of extra space, and the pattern makes room for that. And I knit both of these on Magic Loop. I knit this one entirely on US 1.5 needles, but I once again had a problem with the foot just being a little too big, and so this one is the sock when I started to learn and do what I still do now, which is that I use a 1.5 needle for the leg and then went down to a US 1 for the foot. I think after a year of pretty regular wear, you can't really tell the difference anymore. When I first knit them, you could tell. And both of these use a wrap and turn short row heel, which was my first ever short row heel. So I guess that was the first lesson of these, is how to do a short row heel. I also learned how to do 3-color color work. I learned basically the risks of long floats specifically, In this one, I basically had to go in and cut and then weave in the end of a bunch of the floats because they were just so tight. Not even necessarily because there was anything wrong with my tension, because some of the floats around this leg are like half of the sock. And there's just no way for a sock to have the negative ease a sock needs to have and have floats that long. Like if I was going to go back and remake these, I would do ladder recticard around the top of the leg in these parts of the pattern that have the longer floats. I also learned the downside of using this smoother, slippery yarn, like Cascade Heritage and Knit Pictorial especially, are really smooth, soft yarns. That's wonderful. They feel great to work with, but you can really see, let's see, yeah, here, you can see where you're catching the floats. And something that I think the year of wear has kind of diminished the effect of, but when I first knit these, you could really tell that some of the floats were basically getting pulled into the stitches and making them look kind of gappy. With a slightly stickier yarn, usually the stitches will just kind of hold the float on the back and the stitches will stay the right size. But with the super slippery yarn, the stitches just love to pull the float into those stitches, and then you have these gapping stitches and too short floats. And that's not really a tension thing, that's not a technique thing. There's nothing you can really do to fix that except use a more rustic yarn. And so that's now something I keep in mind when I'm knitting color work. I still sometimes choose to use these softer yarns, but I just keep aware of the potential downsides when I'm doing that. I also learned not to necessarily always trust what you see online, especially this turquoise color, and I should have trusted that it was called turquoise, but on the Wool & Co website, it looked a little bit less green of a blue. And I still really like how it looks, but it's not really the classic Stardew Valley color, and I really couldn't find the classic Stardew Valley color. And so these socks actually inspired my first ever trip to Boston Fiber Company. Basically, when I was knitting these, I realized that the navy that I used for these mountains was darker than I wanted it to be. I wanted, for the final version for my friend and roommate, to have a more like true navy instead of this very, very black dark navy. But because of how inaccurate the color of this was online, I figured that I should probably go see the color in person. And so I decided to take myself on a little trip to Boston Fiber Company because I saw that they had the color I wanted in stock. And so I was able to go and see the color I was thinking of in person and know for sure that that was going to be the right color. And I also got some other stuff that's going to lead us right into our next one. This is another pair of socks I think of very fondly. These are knit with Cascade Heritage it's like a pink color, but I feel like everywhere I see it, it has a different name. So I just wrote down the number. It's 5751. It's the peachy pink. And then the main color is the Boston Fiber Company BFC colorway on the Baker Street fingering base. And don't let my poor caring for these socks dissuade you from Boston Fiber Company's yarns. I've been throwing these in the washing machine and dryer for like 6 months at this point, maybe longer. Like this is not even the same yarn color, the same ball of yarn that I use for the cuff. So even the Cascade Heritage faded. This color looked much more beautiful when it was fresh and not dirty and muddied from time in the washing machine. And also take this as a lesson that like I wash everything in my washing machine on cold. So even washing on cold, your colors are gonna get muddy if you wash your socks in the washing machine. You should hand wash your socks. It's not that hard. In fact, I genuinely think it's easier to hand wash my socks than walk down to the laundromat and do my laundry. And I knit these socks using the Summerly Cuff Club Volume 2, the August cuff. I think I more or less followed the base pattern for the rest of it. I didn't really have a full vanilla formula yet, so I imagine I must have just followed the numbers in the pattern. And these socks are 72 stitches on US 1 with a heel, flap, and gusset. These socks, I feel like second to these, are my most like impactful in learning to knit socks because these ones fit really badly. And that inspired a whole like perfect sock experiment journey to finding a well-fitting vanilla heel flapping gusset pattern for me. And these were the reason that I went on that journey, was because these just like fit really awkwardly. I also, while knitting these socks, learned how to knit without looking because I was on the train to go visit my cousin who was dog sitting for her dad, and she was going to be playing, I think, Cult of the Lamb. It's like a Switch game, and she was going to be playing that, and I was like, oh, I'm going to want to watch her play and not be looking at my knitting, so I need to learn how to knit without looking so I can watch while knitting, because not knitting was clearly not an option. So I spent the whole train ride to her just practicing my knitting without looking, and I think I got pretty good at it. I also, while visiting my cousin, we decided me and my cousin love to shop, and so we decided to go thrifting, and then we went to Michael's because it's like pretty near the thrift store. And while I was at Michael's, I bought some DPNs, and so the second of these socks, couldn't tell you which it is now, but one of these socks I knit on DPNs. So it was my first time doing that. Okay, we have a whole host of socks right now that I can't show you. I'm sorry. So we'll try to be like a little quicker with these. As a stand-in for number 5, this was my like little sample test for myself. I made another one for my roommate. I don't have very good pictures of this, so this is literally all I have. I made a cute little band for it. At least you can see that. And my roommate I suspected would have smaller calves and feet than me. So I made theirs 72 stitches down to 64 stitches, so one size smaller than mine. And I changed up the colors a little. I think on this one, the only thing I changed was using a different sky color. It still wasn't quite right, but it was a little bit less turquoise than these. And that one I continued what I learned on my own Sturdy Valley socks of going down from the 1.5 needle on the leg to the size 1 needle on the foot. Even if your foot is not smaller than your ankle, if it's only like the same size or a little bit bigger, I highly recommend this because the foot is where your sock is going to be taking the most wear, and so the denser stitches can help protect it. It also doesn't matter if the floats are a little bit tighter around your foot because they don't need to get over the heel, whereas the leg and cuff do. So I think it makes your color work look cleaner and makes it more durable to go down a needle size for the foot regardless. But especially if, like me, your foot is pretty significantly smaller than your ankle, it's like it's not a want, it's a need. And then stand in for pair number 6. And for myself, I made this little mismatch pair for my roommate. They got 2 full pairs. So stand in for pair number 6. Again, 72 stitches down to 64 stitches. This one I actually only did on US 1.5 because I finally gave in and decided to try using 9-inch circulars for socks. And boy, did it change my life. I had really thought that I was not going to enjoy it. And it took me a few pairs to really start to genuinely enjoy using the 9-inch circulars. But it looked so much cleaner. It was night and day looking at the spring pair versus the winter pair that I knit on the 9-inch circulars. But because I didn't know if I was going to like the 9-inch circulars yet, at first I only bought the US 1.5s. And then once I knew I liked them, I went in, bought the ones. But at the time of knitting my roommate's winter socks, I only had the 1.5, so I just did the whole sock in it because I figured I would rather that clean, crisp look than get the slightly smaller stitches on the foot. And honestly, my color was just so much cleaner that my stitches looked smaller on the foot anyway with the 9-inch circular US 1.5. So that was my big lesson with my roommate's winter socks, was just 9-inch circulars for color work are 100% worth it. And I have an actual good picture here. So that was Christmas gift 1. Christmas gift number 2 was basically while I was knitting these, I was feeling just how soft Knit Pick Stroll was, and my aunt loves soft things. Like it's someone that I would consider a personality trait, how much she loves soft things. And so the whole time I was knitting with the stroll, I was like, my aunt would love this. My aunt would love the feel of this. And so I decided that for my aunt, I needed to knit something with her in Knit Pick Stroll. And I knew that Knit Pick Stroll had bare yarn and that some dyers used it. And specifically, I knew that ChemKnits Creations uses a lot of Stroll. And so I went to the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop and just kind of browsed around until I found one that called to me and then checked to see if it used Stroll. And it was almost immediately right at the top of the page was this beautiful purple tonal, and my aunt's favorite color is purple. And so it was just perfect, meant to be. I bought the Stroll and I made my aunt a pair of Mermaid Avenue socks by Summer Lee. Again, as we're getting into these like Christmas gifts from last year, I just want to quickly take a second to brag. I got basically everyone's size perfectly right. I did not ask anyone to measure their foot for me. I used only what I knew historically of the people around me's shoe size. I knew most of their shoe sizes. And my like general impressions of how big I thought their feet looked, like how wide their feet were, or what I knew about the width of their feet, just from like I feel like it comes up sometimes how wide feet are. And also especially for my aunt, her feet are only like a little bit smaller than mine. Like I think I wear 10 and a half shoes and she wears like 9.5 shoes. And so I have worn some of her shoes, and I know that she tends to wear wides, but I also know her feet don't look that wide. And so I was using all of this knowledge, and I chose to do these 64 stitches for the Mermaid Avenue socks. And they fit perfectly. And I used a US 1 needle. And then for the accent color, I used some leftovers of this Boston Fiber Company BFC colorway. Okay, my 8th pair of socks were for my Uncle Fletch. These were just like the most vanilla a sock could be. I did a 2x2 cuff, a heel flap and gusset, and I didn't say what the Mermaid Avenue socks also had a heel flap and gusset. I just followed the pattern as it was written. So I did a 2x2 cuff, a heel flap and gusset. Again, one of these things that I'm like, you just absorb this information over time. I just kind of knew my uncle had really wide feet and that he had about the same foot size as my cousin. I don't remember where I got either of those pieces of information, but they live in my brain. And so I knit his socks on 72 stitches on a US 1.5 because I wanted the like maybe a little bit of extra width of going up a needle size without the full extra width of going up stitch count. And I used the Universal Yarn easel in the color Mix and Match. I at some point had been making a Premier order and just got a whole bunch of Universal Yarn easel and Universal Yarn zesty sock because they were $6 a ball. And then they also later had a sale that was buy one get one, so it became $3 a ball. And I basically just got all the other colorways that I hadn't yet gotten. And so this was the Mix and Match colorway. And I used some Knit Pick Stroll in the Grizzly Heather color for the accent colors. These ones I specifically remember I was knitting them when I was having a really big World of Warcraft phase, and I had been planning to log in and play some World of Warcraft, but I was like, let me like get some knitting on these socks done. And I put on the Pathalyrics Goldbound challenge, which is like he's like a World of Warcraft YouTuber who's doing a challenge where he has to make a certain amount of gold in each zone before he can move on to the next zone. And between the knitting and watching that challenge, I had no desire to put down the sock or stop watching, and so I ended up not playing WoW and just knitting these socks and watching the Pathalyrics Goldbound challenge instead. Okay, we've only got two more Christmas present socks left, and then we can get to socks I can show you again. So, 9th ever pair of socks was the Summer Lee Comfort Core socks. I knit these basically entirely according to the pattern for my cousin-in-law. I also use 64 stitches on US 1 needles. Here's a tip for y'all. Anyone whose foot size you don't have particular thoughts about, right? Like if you've never noticed that someone has particularly small or particularly large feet, 64 stitches is almost always going to work. Not only is it the mode, is like in the couple of sock knitting patterns I've released when I've done test knit calls, basically half of the respondents to those test knit calls have had 8-inch foot circumferences. Like it's not just a plurality, it's a genuine majority of people seem to have. And I don't know, maybe somehow I've introduced some kind of bias towards larger feet, but genuinely most people seem to have 8-inch feet. And also my feet are 9 inches in circumference and my ankle is like 10 to 11 inches. And as long as there's not any super tight stitch patterns, so like no color work or no cables, 64 stitches is fine. My aunt's Mermaid Avenue socks, the 64 stitches with a pretty tight stitch pattern, the slip stitches fit me fine. They were like a little on the tight end, but were mostly good. So when in doubt, if you're knitting vanilla sock and you're not sure what size foot someone has, just do 64 stitches. And I used the Universal Yarn Zesty sock in the Iceberg colorway, and for the accent color, I used some Knit Pick Stroll Navy. Okay, last Christmas gift sock. Number 10, my 10th ever pair of knit socks was a pair of vanilla socks for my friend Shivani. Shivani is someone who, when I thought of, and we had been roommates for a while, so I'd seen her shoes around, I thought of her as having small feet, so I figured I would do 56 stitches. But again, same reason I made my uncles with the US 1.5 needles, I figured like let's add a little bit of extra wiggle room, so I did do them on US 1.5 needles. I did a 2x2 rib. At this point, we're like starting to see my preference for 2x2 ribbing emerging, and I did these with an afterthought heel, and these are the only socks I've ever done with a true afterthought heel. Not technique-wise. These ones also like technique-wise cutting into it was the afterthought heel, but I marked while I was knitting where I wanted the heel to go. With these ones that I was making for my friend Shivani, I knew I wasn't seeing her till after Christmas, so I waited till I was done with all my Christmas gift making to cast these on, and so I was working on these on Christmas Day, and I was at my uncle's house, and I'd gotten to a point where I was like, oh, I think this is probably the leg length I want it to be, and I wasn't yet at a place in my sock knitting experience where I could just bust out a heel wherever. Now I really could. Now I could do a short row heel or a heel flapping gusset without thinking about it. But at the time, I was not quite there. So I figured, let's just keep knitting this as a tube and I'll add in the heel later. And that's exactly what I did. It was genuinely an afterthought. I figured out once the socks were fully knit, toes done, where I needed that heel to go. And for these, I used basically just like the leftovers I had from other Christmas gifts. So I used some leftovers of the Knit Pick Stroll that I had made my Mermaid Avenue socks with, and I used some Knit Pick Stroll Navy that I had used from my Sturdy Valley socks. I just went out for a mid-video bathroom break. I can't, my roommate left for me. Yay. Okay, we're back onto socks that I actually have with me that I can show you for real. We're at number 11. These are another example of why you shouldn't machine wash your socks. These used to be like a much crisper white. These were the first in my perfect sock experiment. There's a whole video on these, so I won't yap too long. But basically, I knit these on 72 stitches and then went down to 64 for the foot. I had been suspecting that I was going to need to start doing that, and this was when I finally put it into practice. I used a Roxanne Richardson video on using your heel diagonal to calculate the length of your heel flap, and this resulted in a heel flap that was about an inch longer than the typical patterns would recommend. And I found that this was just a little bit too long for me. It was better than the standard too short heel flap that something like this would have, but it was a little too long. And I used the Universal Yarn Zesty sock in the color Nostalgia, and the cuff and toes were actually in hand-dyed wool to dye for Platinum DK that I mistakenly got. I ordered the Platinum sock and got the Platinum DK, and it took me the entirety of knitting these socks to realize that it was the DK and not the regular Platinum sock. But I think especially with this cabled cuff, the density it adds actually makes it stiffer and more resistant to loosening. Like these, I'll put them on, and even with the cables, because of how soft merino is, and because even the very dense sock gauge is not quite dense enough, these just kind of like relax really quickly. Like look at this one was on the inside of the fold and this was on the outside, and even just like the fold, you can see it changes the width. Whereas these ones, you can't tell which is on the inside and outside, because I think that density just helps it hold its shape a little better. So these were the first experiment. I still wear these all the time. I think they go with a lot of my outfits, which probably says a lot about me that these like elementary school inspired colors match my aesthetic. But yeah, I love these. I wear them a lot. They do stay up. They don't like fall down in my shoes like these ones would, but they're just not, they weren't the perfect fit, but they were a wonderful step in that direction. Okay, number 12. We previewed these when I was showing you how the Cascade Heritage looks hand washed versus machine washed. These are mostly the Murmuration socks from Summer Lee's The Sock Project, which is just like a really classic pointel lace kind of pattern. I'm fairly certain I knit these on 72 stitches US 1 needles, but I don't know for 100%. And I used the Cascade Heritage again in that 5751, not entirely sure what the color is called. But I decided to diverge from the pattern a little and do a picot cuff. I just been thinking about how cute it would be to have picot cuff and pointel lace, and I was correct. Like, look at that. And so I basically just found a free sock pattern with a picot cuff, which ended up being the Valentine socks. And then I subbed in the Murmuration socks, used just a regular heel flap and gusset, and I decided I wanted to do a German short row heel because just in my experience, short row heels fit me better. And so I just used the German short row heel pattern from the sock project. These ones I learned, this was my first ever lace pattern. So I learned how to do lace, I learned how to do the picot cuff, and I learned how to do the German short row heel. So a lot of new things in these socks. I also have very fond, unfond memories of these. I decided to knit these in the Boston Public Garden in the winter, which, like, why would I do that? But the winter isn't the part that makes it unfond. It's that if you've ever been to the Boston Public Garden with any food anywhere on your person, you have met the fat squirrels. I occasionally will eat lunch in the Boston Public Garden, and every single time I regret it because the squirrels will not leave you alone if you have food on you. And so, especially if you want to try to put the food down so you can do something with your hands like knitting, you can't. You're gonna have to fight off the squirrels. I'm gonna include a clip of me knitting in the public garden and then the squirrels that were approaching me. So you like proof and evidence while knitting these. And then the other main thing to know about these is that I've worn them once and they got some dirt on the side and it's starting to come off, but I don't know, maybe I just like don't have enough elbow grease. I just can't get the dirt off the side. And I feel overprotective of them where I'm like, well, I can't wear them because I'm gonna get dirt on them. And I don't know how to effectively wash it off with hand washing. So if any of you have tips for how to like get spots of dirt off when you're hand washing, let me know. Okay, number 13, more Summerlee. That's crazy. These are the Summerlee clog socks. As you can see, these are my tallest socks by a lot. Like, let's compare them to my other tallest socks. Like, they've got a couple inches on my Stardew Valley socks. And these are a DK weight pattern. And so I knit them holding a strand of fingering weight, the Hypnotic Yarn February Yarnable that I got. They were doing like a Black Friday sale where their past Yarnable boxes were having, it was a good discount. And so I got their February one from, I think, last year. The color was Cupid's Bow. And then I used Drops Brushed Alpaca Silk in the powder pink color. And so the actual Cupid's Bow was a much warmer pink. And then the Brushed Alpaca kind of cooled it down. But you can see on the heels, the warmer pink is coming out because the Brushed Alpaca has entirely worn away. Like, the Brushed Alpaca could not handle the wear on the heels, and the soles a little bit, but not quite as much as the heels. And these, I didn't even really enjoy knitting these, but they're so soft. They're one of my favorite pairs of socks to wear in the winter, even though they're way too big. I think they were 64 stitches, even at a DK weight gauge, which is just too much. And I decreased for the feet. I decreased all the purl columns from 2 stitches down to 1 stitch, which is a massive hack. If you're knitting a cabled pattern that you want to decrease between the leg and the foot, and it has 2 purls in the purl columns, you can just decrease to 1 purl, and it's like the perfect seamless way to decrease, and then you just decrease the same amount on the sole. So I think that it was like I decreased maybe 6 on each. But even so, just like 64 stitches on a DK weight gauge is too big. I prefer like 48 stitches on DK weight gauge. And though cables pull it in, not that much. And I don't remember, and I truly don't remember what needle size I used for these. I wish I could tell you. I think it was probably 3, maybe 4, maybe 2, somewhere in that range. And these, like, the thing that made me want to knit these was the strong heel where the cables kind of like split around the heel, and I thought that was really pretty. And it is, and I learned the strong heel from these, which was great. Another heel for me to pull from when I'm thinking of heels. But I personally found that these strong heels didn't fit me very well. It could just be because the socks were too big to start with. So I want to give strong heels another chance on a pair of socks that's maybe a little bit less oversized. But also strong heels just are kind of bigger, looser heels that work better for people with high insteps. And I don't have high insteps. I have pretty normal insteps and like pretty small heels. So I think that perhaps my best bet for the strong heel would be doing something like the Vanilla is the New Black pattern that has a like ribbed strong heel. That intrigues me, but I haven't tried it yet. And so these heels specifically are quite loose. I also ran out of the Brushed Alpaca Silk a little bit. So this one's a little weird. I think I held the like very end of the pattern double, which is like a white yarn or something. And then I did a little longer toe, and this one just has a little toe. So these are a little wobby-sobby, but I love them for who they are. Okay, we've got sock experiment number 2, and also my first ever design. These are, maybe you recognize them, the Holinov socks. Obviously, in the winter, Heated Rivalry took the world by storm. And so when I was trying to decide what to do for these, I had to do Heated Rivalry socks. I couldn't not do Heated Rivalry socks. So this is Shane Hollander's jersey colors. And this is like more or less Ilya Rosenov's jersey colors. Technically, the stripes on Ilya Rosenov's jersey would be this red, but the colors of the team, the like fictional team that he plays for, is like black and gold and white. And so I wanted to speak to the actual colors more than the stripes that are on the jersey in the show. So these ones use black Cascade Heritage. This is Cascade Heritage in the color Marine, which was the one that I ended up getting for the mountains here from Boston Fiber Company. And then, of course, Cascade Heritage White, and then Cascade Heritage Gold and Yellow, and then this is Knit Pick Stroll, I think Poppy. I knit these 72 stitches down to 64 on a US 1 needle. I used my classic 2x2 rib. I did a heel flap and gusset. In this case, because this heel flap had been too long, I came up with kind of my own metric for heel flap. I noticed that when I was wearing these, they would kind of fall down so that this part wanted to sit where my foot and ankle met. And so I realized that if I just measured from that point down to the floor, that was how long the heel flap needed to be. And so based on that measurement, it was 2.5 inches for me. I knit this heel flap to 2.5 inches, and that proved perfect. Just got the notification that my cousin is on her way. So we've got maybe 45 minutes. We'll see how much we can get through in that time. But basically, the 2.5 inch heel flap ended up the perfect length. And then I also, because I started to get really unscientific with my experiment basically immediately, decided to make another change of doing the square heel turn instead of the round heel turn. And because if you've made it this far, you're a true fan, I will give you spoilers that after a couple of months of thinking more on sock fit and heel flap and gusset and all of that, I actually think that these are my perfect sock. I think that this is my perfect sock recipe. Like, I think 72 stitches with a 2.5 inch heel flap with a square heel turn and then decrease during the gusset to 64 stitches, I think that that's my perfect fit. And so from these I learned square heel turn, but I also learned my perfect sock recipe as of late. And because I ended up writing up this pattern and putting it on Ravelry for free, I learned how to write patterns. Okay, on to perfect sock experiment number 3. Actually, the first lesson of these was don't put white socks down where you dye yarn. It's just one little blue speck, it's fine. These ones, once again, were US 1 needle, 72 stitches down to 64. But I kind of wondered if the reason that the square heel turn worked so well was because of the shape of the square heel turn. It's a little bit narrower but deeper, or if it was because it decreases the gusset size because you end on fewer stitches than you would with a round heel turn. And so I was curious which of those factors might be more impacting the fit. And so I decided to go back to the round heel turn for these ones, but instead decrease before the heel so that I was decreasing the gusset size without that like different shape of a heel. At the time when I was making these, I thought that perhaps the decreasing for the gusset was better and the round heel turn was the reason that these fit worse than the Holland socks. But after more thinking and more wearing, when I wear these, they kind of like pull back like this, because I actually think that the heel is not deep enough. I think that decreasing before makes my heel flap too narrow, and so it has to pull back to fit. And so I think that actually decreasing during the gusset makes more sense, or at least if I was going to decrease before the heel, I should only decrease on the instep before the heel and leave the heel flap on the original stitch count. And the white is a Cascade Heritage white, and the cuff is this cute little, once again, the Wool to Die For Platinum DK. I dyed it, so I don't want to waste it, and so I used some of that for the cuff. A little kind of like multicolor muted rainbow. And this is actually my most recent perfect sock experiment video. I keep saying I'm going to make another, and I have specific plans for what I want to do for it, but I haven't done it yet. Okay, we're on to number 16. These are my raspberry mocha socks. These were just kind of like a self-drafted colorwork heart motif that I used. Some hand spun. I spun this on a drop spindle. It's fin sheep that I got from my first year at Burka, which is a Society for Creative Anachronism historical market event that happens in the winter in New Hampshire. I knit these on 72 stitches down to 64 for the foot with a 1x1 rib, and I did a fish lips kiss heel. I just kind of wanted to see what the fuss was about. I did these on a US 1 needle except for the colorwork, which I used a US 1.5 needle, and the yarn was Ancient Threads Farms, which I also got from Burka, but this year. And the base is their Highland sock, so it's a 100% Highland wool, and it's this kind of like variegated brown color. I learned the fish lips kiss heel from these, but the biggest lesson I got from these was just how wonderful 100% wool is, because basically 100% wool felts as you wear it, which adds durability, but also if you don't like the feeling of pearl bumps on the bottom of your foot, I don't really mind them, but I do feel them. If you hate the feeling, because I know some people don't like that, like pearl bump on the bottom of their feet, the felting completely smooths the sole, so it's nice, it's just nice and smooth against your feet. And so far, I've worn these a good amount. They don't peel any worse than I'm pulling up these ones, which are Cascade Heritage, but they're deceptive because I took a depiller to them. These ones did not get depilled, just because I think that like sometimes with non-superwash yarn, the pills end up getting kind of like felted and help add that stability, whereas if you pull off the pills, then you're taking away that fiber. I don't know if that's actually true or not, it just feels right to me. So I try not to depill my 100% wool socks, but like even with a good amount of wear, these aren't pilling any worse than Cascade Heritage or Knit Fix Stroll. There have been not even the slightest hint of holes yet, and they're very soft from the felting on the sole. I also have a very fond memory of these, which is that I went to New York to see Chicago with Whitney Levitt, and I took the train both ways, and it was like a 1 day trip, which I've done a couple times, but it's a busy day. I basically woke up at like 4:30 a.m. to leave my house at like 5 a.m. to get a train at like 6 a.m. And then I got the train and it was, 4.5 hours long. Then I hung out in New York for a while, went to see the show, and then got the train back. And I was knitting these all the while, and also a couple other socks I brought with me. And I was knitting these, and I finished them on the train back. And the yarn had been bleeding on my hands the whole time that I was knitting with it. And so when I got back, I was like, let me just quickly like rinse these socks. I bought some Synthropol and some color catcher to get some of the extra dye off. And so I was like, let me just like get this done. And it took maybe 4 rinses and multiple hours. And so my train, which had gotten back to Boston at midnight, and then I actually got an Uber home. I treated myself to an Uber home. I had gotten home like just before 1 and ended up staying up until about 4 a.m. rinsing these socks and accidentally stayed up for a full 24 hours because of these socks. Number 17, we're getting into Sock Madness. This is fun. For those of you who don't know, Sock Madness is a speed sock knitting competition that happens from March through June, maybe, with multiple rounds with fewer people moving on each round. And I have a whole video on my experience and some drama that happened with my experience with that. But before any of that, before any drama, this was my Sock Madness qualifier, the newspaper socks by Cow from Mars. Because the Sock Madness is a speed competition, I did all the Sock Madness socks on the smallest size allowed for competitors. So that was basically always a medium. So in this case, the medium was 72 stitches. I used a US 1.5 needle for the leg and 1 for the foot. I used Bear Felici for this bear color. I used Langeville Rosa for the pink details, and I used Lang Super Socks in the color 188 for this greeny turquoise color. These socks were my first colorwork heel flap and gusset, like the first time I actually had to follow a chart for the heel flap, heel turn, and gusset. And it was also my first time doing mosaic knitting because it's got this like beautiful mosaic heel. And I learned surface crochet. There's a lot of lessons that come from Sock Madness socks. That's one of the best parts about Sock Madness, is trying challenging new techniques that you've never done before. Though I didn't find these that challenging. These were pretty easy. I think I was the 100th person out of 1,000 to finish, because by this was February of this year. I was pretty speedy at color work. Okay, number 18. These ones are just in Ravelry as secret socks because they're a design I want to refine and submit to Knitty at some point. But I think that because these aren't the final design, I think it's fine. I think according to Knitty's rules, you're not supposed to like publish pictures of your designs that you're going to submit to Knitty. And they specifically say like on Ravelry or Instagram, but they don't say if you can just like show them in videos. So I've been leaning on the side of no, but because these aren't even the finished sock, this is just kind of like prototype 1, I am going to show you. I'm already showing you. But I liked these zigzag cuffs so much, and I just wanted some more of them. So I did zigzag cuffs, but in actual fingering weight yarn this time. And so we've got our little cuff, and then we break off into some Intarsia colorwork cables. I love to make things harder for myself and others. This was fiddly. This was one that like took a lot of hand dexterity. And then we carry that. I feel like cables always get carried down the instep, but I wanted to carry it down like along the heel. And I feel like there's something kind of like sporty to this to me. And then the toes are pretty normal. I included a little stripe across the toe, but that was it. And so I did the cuff on 80 stitches because cables can be pretty tight. And so I did a larger stitch count for the cables, and then I decreased down to 72. And then, as always, 264 for the foot. I used a US 1 needle. I did the heel flap and gusset with the square or Dutch heel. And this is some Knit Fix Stroll that I dyed myself. Isn't it so beautiful and fun? Not to toot my own horn, but I love the way I dye yarn. I dye it just for me. And this is the Cascade Heritage turquoise. And these ones are the first socks that I really like undid and redid a few times until I got it how I liked it. I tried a couple different things with this cable before I found the version that really worked for me. And this was only the first prototype. There's going to be another version that improves on a couple things I didn't love about these. So another undoing and redoing, except without the undoing, just the redoing. Because sometimes a functional prototype is good too. Okay, number 19, the only other pair of socks that I don't have with me is the Blueberry Waffle socks, which are a free DK weight pattern, and I just kind of like took the waffle pattern that they had and did it on with the stitch count that I wanted to, which was 72 stitches on a US 1.5 needle for my sister. Once again, wide foot, but I wanted a little wiggle room, so I did the 1.5 needle instead of going up the stitch count, and I did a heel flap and gusset with a round heel. The main color was a Nomad Snowdrift that I hand dyed, and the bear color was Wool to Dye For Platinum Sock Bear. And like these, and also like these, the Blueberry Waffle socks were also some socks that I worked on while I was on my New York trip. Okay, number 20. Isn't that crazy? We're at 20? I think we're only at February, March. This is the first round from Sock Madness, the Quasar socks. I knit these on 64 stitches, US 1.5 needles, and these were toe up. These were my first ever finished toe up pattern. There's another coming down the line that was my first started toe up, but I finished these before I finished those other ones. And these ones, I truly think sometimes I feel more positively about them, but I truly think that these are the ugliest things I've ever knit, and that's not the pattern's fault. Everyone else's looks gorgeous. This was fully me thinking, you know what would be fun? Self-striping gray and black yarn with neon stripes. Like these are tacky, but they're tacky in a way that is kind of growing, that has grown on me over the months. And these also have a heel flapping gusset, but a toe up heel flapping gusset, and a 1x1 twisted rib. These socks were a big lesson for me because it was my first time doing a toe up heel flapping gusset, first time binding off a toe up sock. So this one used the Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off. This is also my first time adding beads to a knitting pattern, and it taught me how to cable without a cable needle, especially because a lot of these cabled stitches are getting slipped for a couple rounds and you have the beads on them, which makes it a lot easier to hold them in place when you're cabling without a needle, which I think is a nice like introduction to cabling without a needle. And the very boring base that I decided to make tacky was the Lang Super Socks Merino color 640. And I got this yarn the same time I got this. Boston Fiber Company had a really big sale. I think actually I talked about it in one of my podcasts, but I got this exclusively because it was on really good sale. Like, there wouldn't be a world where I would really want socks in this color. And then the accent colors are hand-dyed Wool to Dye For Platinum sock. I already begun to have ideas for my hidden depth socks. Those will be coming down the line too. And so I had bought some fluorescent dye and I wanted to swatch them. So these were all my kind of fluorescent dye swatches that I figured I would put to use. Number 21, another Sock Madness pattern. These were the second round of Sock Madness, the Pretty Privilege socks. These were like a beautifully intricate cable and lace pattern. Let me try to stretch it out for you. Look at that. Another toe up pattern, another pattern that I did on 64 stitches, this time on US 1. And I used the Road Trip sock yarn, 100% BFL, which I got from the same Boston Fiber Company sale. These were another toe up heel flapping gusset and another twisted rib cuff. This time it was not 1x1 twisted rib. It was kind of a random twisted rib based on the lace pattern. And though these didn't teach me any like new skills or anything, these taught me to love lace knitting. Like, this very basic pointelle lace is so beautiful and I love the look of it, but this intricate lace was so fun to knit. I really, when I looked at the chart, was like, this is going to take forever, this is going to be so hard, it's going to be so mind intensive. But instead, I just loved knitting it. The chart felt really intuitive and just something about it really clicked with me. So I really, really enjoyed knitting these, and I really learned to love lace knitting because of knitting these. Number 22, you know her, you love her, my hidden depth socks. These were technically, my Hole Knot socks were technically my first pattern, but these were my real first pattern. Like, these were the first one that I really figured out my pattern writing style, where I got a tech editor, where I got them test knit. And these like sprung from just a conversation at knit night at Boston Fiber Company, or it's not called knit night, it's called Sip and Stitch. It's called Sip and Stitch. All crafts welcome. And I was talking to someone about, like, they talked about liking a super bright, like, hot pink from one of the indie dyers. And I was like, oh, you should try holding it up under a black light. A lot of those neon colors are actually fluorescent. And somehow that got us to talking about using that fluorescence to do kind of a like secret reveal kind of thing, where you do like color work that only really pops under a black light. And so then I started thinking about like, where are places where there are a lot of black light? Bowling alleys and aquariums. Technically, it turns out I'm wrong. Aquariums don't have black lights. They have actinic lighting, still haven't learned how to say that, which is like blue lighting, but it has the same effect on fluorescence. My cousin just texted and asked if I want Diet Coke Lime. I do indeed want Diet Coke Lime. Where was I? Before I got distracted by Diet Coke. Yeah, so I figured either I'm going to make a bowling alley sock or I'm going to make an aquarium sock to do this like secret fluorescence, and thus the hidden depth socks were born. Most of the color work is not secret, though it does, all of these are fluorescent colors that pop extra under a black light. Pictured, but these little anglerfish that are hiding on the instep, you can still see them without a black light, but you can really see them in a black light. And I had so much fun with every stage of these, like dyeing up the fluorescent swatches, figuring out how to make a dark fluorescent color, knitting the color work. This is a really potato chippy Moorish color work chart. Not to toot my own horn. I have another color work pattern that I don't think is super potato chippy or Moorish, but these ones I knit, in both cases, I knit all of the fish in one day because I just couldn't put it down. And these ones, because I knew they were going to be a little taller, I actually started at 80 stitches for the cuff and then decreased after the color work down to 72, and then decreased again for the foot to 64, used a US 1.5 for the leg and a US 1 for the foot. I did a variation of the German short heel. It's basically my favorite variation. Most of my patterns are going to have this version of the German short heel. It's the one where you do German short O's on the first half of the heel, and then on the second half you just slip the stitches. And I don't know if I have one where it's really clear. Oh, I do. Spoilers for a later sock. But It creates a really clean line that I really like. And as always, or as usual, my 2x2 ribbing. And for the yarn, this is the Cascade Heritage, once again the marine. This is Cascade Heritage in black. The contrast colors are my own, but you can actually buy these. These all, including a color not exactly this one, but one very similar to this, can be bought as like a little mini skein set. There are 5 10-gram mini skeins, so an orange, a blue, a purple, a red, and a gray black kind of color for $14 in total. And it also comes with this pattern. So that's the contrast colors, and it's on the Wool to Die For Platinum sock base. And then for these ones, I like really refined my pattern writing skills. I learned kind of the whole process of pattern writing. So I learned how tech editing works. I learned how to run a test knit. I learned how to do all like the marketing stuff. I learned how to organize all the kind of like behind the scenes, how to post on Ravelry, how to make Etsy happen. And so I love these and feel quite fond of them. And also, I got to take these to the aquarium with my sister. We took a day off work in April and went to the New England Aquarium to get some pictures and to just go to the aquarium, see Myrtle the turtle. Before this trip, I hadn't been to the aquarium since high school, and I really forgot, like, something changes in your brain when you see the giant ocean tank, because when I, like literally the minute I saw the giant ocean tank, I said, I need to see Myrtle. I'm not here for anyone else. I'm here for Myrtle the turtle. And that's just something I had to learn about myself. Myrtle the turtle socks, anyone? She's just an icon. A Boston icon. Like, sure, giant Pacific octopuses, octopodes, octopi, however you want to say it, they're cool, but are they cooler than Myrtle the turtle? Like, the penguins love the penguins, but Myrtle the turtle. So these are the Hidden Depth socks. Number 22 for the year. Number 23, we got to the first ever cast on toe-up sock that I hinted at. These are, do they beat clog socks for tallness? These are pretty tall. Don't beat the clog socks, but they're my tallest like non-DK sock, I think. Now I've got to test them against Stardew Valley too. Is this a good use of our time? They slightly beat Stardew Valley. These socks were knit toe up for like the main reason someone would choose to knit a pair of vanilla socks toe up, which is that I got the Earth Yarns Unique Sock Kit Mini in the color 68. I have another color that I also plan to knit a similar pair of socks with at some point. And the sockets come in 2 matched balls, so that if you knit both, you'll get a pair of perfectly matching socks. And I wanted to get the whole stripe sequence, because you can see it's not like a repeating sequence. It's like a whole little gradient. And so I wanted to get the entirety of it, and the only way to do that is to knit toe up. I got the mini one, which is technically for children, but I don't like, how tall would the adult socks be? Like knee socks. And so it was 60 grams total. And so I figured like most of my pairs of socks are about 65 grams. So I figured it would make most sense to do the contrasting colors. And because of that, they ended up really long. I haven't decided yet for the other one if I want to do the contrasting heel toe and cuff again to make another long pair, or if I want to do like a slightly short pair, is I think what the full 60 grams without any contrast colors will get me. So that was number 23 for the year. And I learned a couple of lessons from these socks. Number one, because these were my first cast-on toe-up socks, I learned to do these magic cast-on. And then also, these were my first socks that I knit on Addi Flexi Flips. So I learned how to use them and also the real pros of using them. The biggest pro, I would say, and if you've watched my last podcast, I talk a little bit about a different version of flexible DPNs that I'm using. But the biggest pro of using flexible DPN trios like Addi Flexi Flips is that the socks, like, I'll just pull them out right now. You can throw them in your bag and the stitches just kind of stay on the middle between both needles instead of falling off like they do with DPNs and Magic Loop. At least for me, Magic Loop falls off because I accidentally pull on the cord and then the stitches come out. That might be user error. DPNs are just, if you throw them in your bag without stoppers, they might fall off. So I found that flexible DPNs are the perfect on-the-go needles, and these socks were how I discovered it. But TLDR, I prefer these off-brand trios because I don't really like the Addi Flexi Flip specifically. Okay, number 24, and back to Sock Madness. These are Sock Madness round 3, the Whiskey Ahoy socks. These were a really unique pair of socks because instead of being cuff down or toe up, they are heel out. You cast on at the heel and you increase for a million years basically, and then you graft together your instep and then continue the cuff in the foot from there. These ones, at least the cuff in the toe, ended up being 68 stitches. I used a US 1 for this one, which ended up being a little bit too tight. So I ended up going up to a US 1.5 for this one. And I used the Knit Picks Felici Bear, the Knit Picks Stroll Poppy, and the Cascade Heritage Marine. And these ones use a 1x1 rib. And from these I learned, because there's not really a way to easily get like this wide of a sock on 9-inch circulars, I finally learned, it's not really learning, but I tried out knitting the colorwork inside out to keep the floats a little longer. And then I feel like really improved my grafting skills, because when you knit a toe, your grafting doesn't have to be that neat, because it's just the toe. So I usually pull my toes like pretty tight. Like I'm basically just sewing it. I'm not really grafting neatly. But because this is the instep, you really want the grafting to look neat. And I think I really achieved a neat graft across the instep. Number 25 was my Comfort Core socks. This was my first like repeat pattern because I made it the first pair for a gift and I wanted one for myself. So I also used Universal Yarn Zesty sock, this time in the colorway Cupcake. I just really enjoyed seeing the different way that this yarn like it looks on different stitch patterns, because in the ribbing you get to see little purl bumps, and then on the heel flap you get to see how it looks with the slip stitches, and then also on the slip stitch panel, but then you also get to see how it looks on like the stockinette foot, but also the seed stitch instep. So there's just so many different stitch patterns that I think that this kind of like I don't stripy, like it's not speckles but it's not stripes, this kind of like slashes of colors is really fun to try out with different stitch patterns. So Universal Yarn Zesty sock, as always 72 stitches down to 64 for the foot. The accent color is once again the Wool to Die For Platinum DK, and the only real modification I made to this pattern is just I did my little classic square heel turn instead of the round heel turn that the pattern calls for, and I think I also did my like 2.5 inch long heel flap. Okay, and now my last Sock Madness sock, not because I got out. Watch the video if you want to see why I never did more Sock Madness socks than these, but this is the Door in the Sky pattern. These ones were really interesting. I once again did 64 stitches, US 1.5 and US 1 as a heel flapping gusset. This one just called for a square heel. I love when a pattern uses a square heel, but of course the unique interesting thing about these is there's these little holes in the front, which I don't really wear these because I don't know how I would style a pair of socks with holes down the front, but it's really, really interesting. You do this like double knitting and then you bind off and then you do knit each color individually. So you'll do the color underneath in the round and you'll do the main color back and forth, slipping stitches in the other color. And these were just like really cool and unique to work and looked really intimidating reading the pattern ahead of time, and then actually doing it, it was really just like an intelligent pattern. Like for instance, you carry some of your floats on the outside for the ribbing, and kind of learning how to move the floats to be carried on different sides perfectly prepares you, because I'd never done double knitting before, perfectly prepares you for moving the yarn to have the floats where they need to be for double knitting. And you can do this cuff slipping stitches like you would for the color work around it, or you can do the cuff all at once. And so I just really enjoyed knitting these. I used the Nomad Yarn Snowdrift that I hand dyed myself. I did like dip dyeing in a bunch of different fluorescent colors, and then I resist dyed in a darker color over it, and I used some leftover of this Road Trip sock yarn, 100% BFO. And these socks taught me double knitting. Also, you can like see the little double knitting panel compared to the floats. Now I feel like I've got a challenge because I'm getting close to the end. I'm gonna race for the clock. My cousin is still probably like 30 minutes away. Okay, can I get through the rest of my socks in 30 minutes? I can try. Number 27 is kind of part of the like original idea for these hidden depth socks. It's the glowing goldfish version. So I feel like on camera, the difference between the background color and the fluorescent really shows, but in person, it's a little more subtle. And it was really subtle while knitting. Like distinguishing the bright orange from the darker orange on the needles, nearly impossible. But you basically end up with this like kind of subtle motif in regular lighting, and then under a black light, you're like, boom, goldfish. These ones, I didn't follow my own advice. So I did 72 stitches down to 64, but for color work on my ankles, I prefer to do 80 stitches. And these, they fit over my heel, they're not uncomfortably tight. But if you think about like how knit stitches work, part of the way they gain their stretch is by pulling some of the vertical length. And so this is how they look when they're worn. You can't see the fish because they pull too tightly. So these were a real lesson in color work fit being more than just like, does it actually fit? Like one of the reasons you should increase your stitch count is because it'll look better, not just because it will get on your foot or not. And then for these, I also decided to just try out what would happen if I decreased my stitch count before the heel rather than after. And I found that I didn't like it, that the heel was like a little too small, especially when I already had like the tighter ankle and like a little shorty. The heel ends up a little small. I wear these, they fit, but I prefer the bigger short row heel. And these also have my classic little German short row heel with the slip stitches on the way back, and also my classic 2x2 rib. The orange is the same orange as in my Fishy Mini set as in my Hidden Depth socks, and then this background is just another hand-dyed Wool to Die For Platinum sock. In another way that I like let my hubris get to me, not only did I do these on fewer stitches, I used US 1 the whole time, and I did magic loop instead of doing my 9-inch circulars. I just kind of like I usually do magic loop for the cuff. Actually, when I knit all over color work, I'll do my magic loop for the cuff, and then I'll switch to my 1.5 9-inch circulars, and then I'll do DPNs for the heel in size 1, and then I'll do my foot on size 1 9-inch circulars, and then I'll go back to magic loop for the toes. So I use 4 different needles, every pair of all over Colorwork socks. But these ones I just was like, it's a small motif. I won't change my needles. And I probably should have gone up a needle size, especially because I wasn't going up stitch count. Okay, number 28, my Twizzler socks. These are my first summer sock yarn socks. So we're getting more recent. I think I'm gonna be able to get everything in this video. Isn't that exciting? But the light will be, we're gonna have worse lighting for the last few. It'll be okay. These are the Twizzler socks, and I used the Universal Yarn Sugar Socky, which is a 50% superwash merino, 25% bamboo, 25% nylon sock yarn, and the colorway is gummies, which I was like Twizzler gummies. And I knit these on 64 stitches, and it's got a slip stitch, but it doesn't make it too tight. It's just like a nice secure sock, even though 64 stitches, especially with a tighter stitch pattern like this, should be too small for me. And the cuff has a 1x1 twisted rib. I used the heel flapping gusset with my classic 2.5-inch length, and I think I decided to be silly with these and do a round heel turn again. Sometimes I will just do a round heel turn when a pattern calls for it, just to confirm that I still prefer the square heel turn. I do. Okay, 29. We have got the Cherry Baby socks. These are one of my favorite pairs of socks that I've knit. These are on 72 stitches, US 1.5 to US 1 for the foot, 2x2 ribbing. I did a shadow wrap heel just because I wanted to try out some different short row heels, so I decided to try out the shadow wrap heel. And I used Knit Pick Stroll Poppy, Wool to Die For, Platinum Sock Bear, and Cascade Heritage Black. And I made these for the Earth Tone Girls I Love Books and Sock Knitting Cal to match Rainbow Rowell's Cherry Baby, especially because you've got the little diamond on the inside cover. And so I used Stone Knit's Cherry on Top pattern from one of her books. It's either Charming or Joyful Colorwork Socks. Don't remember 100% for sure. And slightly modified the chart. I took away a lot of the extras of the chart and then added this little diamond chart for the rest of it. Okay, number 30. You know we're getting close to the end, but we're actually not getting that close to the end because we're at the pair of socks that the pattern literally just released today. This is the Rosie Maple socks, part of the Rosie Maple Moth sock set. This is my second pattern, but also, depending on how you define it, my third or fourth, I don't know. My second paid part of the set of my second paid patterns. I don't even know if that was the right order of words. This is a pattern that I've written and that came out today, inspired by the lovely whimsical Rosie Maple moths. These are like a lower contrast color work. I like joke that these are the more subtle version, because it's just kind of like from a distance, you're just like, oh, there's like a repeating pattern. It kind of like blends in the eye. So it's a little more low-key. I did these on 80 stitches, US 1.5 down to US 1, which has become, these were I think the first all-over color work that I really like solidified my way of doing all-over color work, where I do cast on 72 stitches, increase to 80 stitches for the color work, do the color work on US 1.5 9-inch circulars, do the heel on US 1 DPNs, and then go to US 1 9-inch circulars while staying on that 80 stitches and then decrease through the toe on Magic Loop US 1. I had kind of worried that like 80 stitches for color work would be a little too much on the foot, especially after these ones were too big, but I think my tension has just improved a lot, and also going down a needle size helps a lot, so these fit really well. And these have a 1x1 rib. I really like 1x1 rib for things that look a little more rustic, and I like a 2x2 rib for something that looks a little cleaner. And I did a little contrasting cast on just for fun. I once again did the German short row heel with the little slipped stitches, and I used the Ancient Threads Farms Highland sock, so basically the same base as this, but an all over brown. And this one I fully reset and rinsed before knitting so it wouldn't bleed like this one did. And then I used Langeville Rose and Daffodil for the color work. Okay, number 31. Where are you? No, but where are you? Oh my gosh, I don't know where number 31 is. Okay, it's okay. I have a picture. Everyone cross your fingers that it's just like in my dirty laundry, because despite what I've now warned you twice, I do sometimes throw my knit socks in my laundry. So hopefully it's just in my laundry. So I don't know where else it would be. It'll probably be under my bed. Okay, we're wasting too much time. Number 31 is my Wild Violet Fibers Boston Fiber Company specific colorway fluorescent fiber company. It's just a pair of vanilla socks, 72 stitches down to 64 stitches on the foot on US 1 needle. I just had to get kind of silly with it, and I did a 2x1 rib. Wait, I know that I had these. Oh, right here. One time when I was a kid, I flipped out because I thought that my sister had stolen and hidden Tenderheart and like threw a fit. And then he was literally just like right there. He was like right in front of me in the TV room. Like sometimes I can't see things. They're not missing. They're right here. Number 31, Wild Violet Fibers, Boston Fiber Company, Pacific Colorway, Fluorescent Fiber Company, vanilla socks, 72 stitches down to 64 stitches on a US 1. I tried to get silly with it into a 2x1 rib. I also, basically the reason I cast these on was because I was swatching how dark I could get this fluorescent color while still having it be fluorescent. And so I needed like something to actually knit up so I could really test how the swatches would look. And so I just did the swatches for these little stripes on the cuff. So each stripe is actually a different swatch, so you can't really tell. Even under a black light, they look pretty similar. But like the bottom stripe is a tiny bit darker than the top. You can kind of see, but the bottom strip's a little darker, but under a black light they look the same, which let me know that I could go with this darker color. And I did the 2x1 rib just to switch it up because I've been doing so much 2x2 and 1x1 ribbing. And this one I did a forethought heel. I just hadn't ever like done the technique where I knit in the scrap yarn, so I figured I might as well check that off my list of things to try. And this one was the first time I actually got to try out my second thought heel idea of knitting the heel while I was still working on the foot and then going and finishing the foot, and it works wonderfully. Highly recommend. Like, great idea in theory and worked in practice. And so then I kind of named this one based on the yarn. It was the Wild Violet Fibers Fluorescent Fiber Company. Anytime I use Wild Violet Fibers, it's on her sock base, which I think is the merino sock base is what it's called. And then the black is some Cascade Heritage in black. Okay, my cousin's now in Quincy, so we've really got to be quick. Number 32 is my hand spun socks. These are another DK pair of socks. I knit these on 48 stitches on US 3 needles. They have a heel flap and gusset, the classic 2.5-inch length. They have a square heel. I did, as I said, I like to do 1x1 rib for more rustic yarns, so I did a little 1x1 rib. And the yarn is hand spun from, this is RH Lindsay Corriedale that I got in the RH Lindsay Begin to Spin sampler. And the main color is Corriedale that I spun from a braid that I got from Ancient Threads Farms. So like same company as this and this. They also sell some roving. So I got that again, also at Birka. And these ones, there's also a video on these. But these were a real like insight into how my hand spun yarn knits up, and also just like really confirmed for me my DK sock numbers. I'd never done just a fully standard DK weight sock before. I'd done these. So these let me know that my guess that like 48 stitches on US 3 would be the right size was correct. Okay, number 33. These are the sushi roll socks. I think these are so fun and kitschy. I did these as a test knit for between the stitches, and I did 72 stitches up to 84 stitches on a US 1.5 needle back down to a US 1 needle. There's a little 2x2 rib, a shadow wrap heel, and I used Nomad Snowdrift Bear, Knit Pick Stroll Cork, Knit Pick Stroll Pea Pod, Langeville Melon, Cascade Heritage Golden Yellow, Regia Pumpkin, and hand dyed Wool to Die For. I think it's the perfect nori color. I mixed yellow and black. I don't remember exactly what ratio. I wouldn't tell you even if I did, because then how could I potentially sell it to you someday? I would probably tell you if I remembered. I may have told you in a past video. And these ones include some 5-color color work, so I had to learn how to do that, and to learn how to do that, I had to learn how to do color work with both hands. When I was knitting these, I did my 3-color color work with both hands, and I didn't really like it, and so I ended up settling into doing 3-color color work, all the colors on one hand. But you just can't do that once you get beyond 3 colors. You really need to start bringing the right hand into the mix. So I had to learn, and I ended up really liking it. Like, I found it really finicky and hard on the Stardew Valley socks, but I guess I've just improved my skills, and so I found it pretty easy and relaxing to do on these. And sometimes now when I'm doing 3-color, and even sometimes just 2-color color work, I'll use both hands just to kind of have a variation of movements to hopefully reduce strain and injury. I'm losing my voice, I'm running out of breath, and my cousin's going to be here in like 15 minutes. But we've gone too far now to separate this into 2 parts. These are a vanilla pair of socks that I knit my classic sock recipe 72 to 64, US 1 needles, 2.5-inch heel flap, square heel turn. I did a 2x2 ribbing. I used the Hobby Summer sock yarn, which is 58% cotton, 38% nylon, and 4% polyester. They don't specify what type of polyester, but it's definitely like it's a stretchy strand like PBT would be. I don't know if it's actually PBT or if it's a different stretchy strand, but stretchy polyester. The biggest lesson on these was just to like pay attention to self-striping yarn, because this was the easiest color management I could have done if I just paid attention for 5 seconds, and I didn't. So instead I have this weird awkward one stripe across the instep right in the middle. Not ideal. My other biggest lesson about these was just that don't let them lie to you that cotton sock yarn is a summer sock yarn. The cotton is sweatier than merino. Like, when I wear these, my feet feel clammy. When I wear any of these, my feet do not feel clammy. It may be cooler, but at the point that it's already hot and my feet are sweating, that amount cooler doesn't make a difference. What does make a difference is that my feet feel sweaty. So I don't think that these are actually that ideal as a summer sock yarn. Okay, number 35. Another of the patterns that came out today. This is the Lemonade Moth socks. So it's like one sock pattern set that you get both of these patterns in. And this is, once again, 72 stitches, 80 stitches, back down to 72, down to 64 for the foot. I use my classic German short away that I slip stitch heel, and I use Cascade Heritage in white, lemon, and tutu. Also, you notice that I say Cascade Heritage. That's not how I'm supposed to say it. There's a thing in linguistics. I'm running out of time. Why am I talking about this? I'm still gonna say it. I think this is important. It's not, but it's called the Mary merger, which is basically like the name Mary like get married, and Merry, like Merry Christmas. In most parts of the US, those have been fully merged, so we say them the same. But in Boston, those 3 are fully distinct. And the way I grew up like just a little bit south of Boston. Mary, like get married, and the name Mary were the same, but Mary was still distinct. So like my cousin is Erin, despite everyone else calling her Erin. But sometime between like media kind of bringing accents together and me being in California for a few years, I have gained elements of that merger, and so I should be saying heritage, but when I'm not thinking about it, I do say heritage, and I think that's really interesting. You'll never catch me dead saying Aaron, though. It's Aaron, but these are the lemonade moth stalks. Is there anything else I didn't say about these? Oh, I have a really fond memory with these, which is that I had been putting off casting them on, just like I had a lot of other projects I was working on, but then the leaf hopper, the iconic entomologist slash knitwear pattern designer, came to the Boston Fiber Company Sip and Stitch, and I had to cast these on so I could be knitting a bug pattern when the entomologist came to knit night. So she's not the biggest moth person. She's more into the less popular bugs. She's an indie bug fan. I'm a little more basic in all things. I accept that I'm basic. Taylor Swift has been my top artist for the entire time I had Spotify, actually. I was going to try to give it years, but it's the entire time that Spotify has been telling me my top artist. It has been Taylor Swift. I know I'm basic. And so I can like a basic bug, like the rosy maple moth. So quick advertisement. Both of these are available on Ravelry and Etsy. I'll link them. $7 for the set on Ravelry, $8 on Etsy, but there will be a sale running. We'll talk about that at the end. Okay, we're at number 36. This is another one that I've been keeping secret, but they were just rejected by Lina, and I think that they make a lot of sense for Knitty, but they don't fit the current Knitty theme, and I don't want to keep keeping them secret. These are what I call the design feature socks. These are one of the best things that I've ever designed. I use a 1x1 twisted rib, again, classic 2.5-inch heel flap with a square heel turn, 72 stitches down to 64, US 1 needles, but let's get really close. Look at that really interesting texture, and look at how it looks when I pull it apart. I designed these using twisted stitches on purpose. That's why it's a design feature, because when new knitters are twisting their stitches and then people are like, hey, have you noticed that you're twisting your stitches? And then someone in the comments will be like, well, if you do it for the whole thing, it's a design feature. And these ones, it's actually a design feature. I love the way that this twisted stitch pattern looks. And I've also, so far, of what I have written of the pattern, I've written it as like a tutorial in twisting stitches and in Eastern versus Western knitting, and how to twist stitches in both and how to not twist stitches in both. And so I think that this is just like a really, really cool texture, but also a really helpful pattern. So I think that like Eastern versus Western twisting stitches in different directions makes it kind of unique in a way that Knitty would appreciate, but their current theme is scrappy, and can't call these scrappy. So I'm just gonna release them on my own. But these are my number 36. My big lesson on these was just like how much the different stitch pattern impacts the heel flap length. Like this heel flap was far fewer rows than a typical slip stitch heel flap. And actually, can you tell? Yes. In this one, I slipped the first stitch of every row of the heel flap like I would with a slip stitch heel flap. And this one I didn't. And that makes it a lot easier to pick up the correct number of stitches, because you end up needing to pick up more than one per every other row. And so you need to pick up like more than one per every slip stitch, which ends up being weird. And so these are the design feature. 37. Can you believe I'm still going? This is all 1 year of sock knitting. These were my sock week socks, so I knit these in like 3 days. Again, 72 stitches down to 64, US 1 needles, 2x2 ribbed cuff, 2.5-inch heel flap, square heel turn. Can we tell that I have a recipe now? And I used the Premier Yarns Fruits Dragon Fruit. And I've been raving about this yarn, and I'm going to keep raving about this yarn. This knits up so nicely. It's so smooth. It's an acrylic sock yarn with a PBT core. And it's like so tightly spun in a way that means it basically never splits. And it's really pleasant to knit with. It has a lot of stretch. And I'd worried that acrylic socks would feel a little sweaty. They don't. They don't feel sweaty when your hands are clammy. They don't feel sweaty on my feet. I love wearing these. I can't wait. I'm waiting. I am waiting. I can't wait. I'm waiting to see if the fruits or vegetables, I think it's called like farm stand, sock yarns go on sale anytime soon. So I would love to snag them on sale, because I want to buy like half the colors. That's how much I love this yarn. And I did Knit Pick Stroll pucker for the heel and toe. And there were some leftovers to the 150 gram ball I used. But if I wanted a like perfectly matching set or not to use contrast colors, I would probably need 2 balls. Number 38, these are my soft serve socks. This was just kind of like a spontaneous design idea. I was at my like childhood home where my cousin is living right now for her birthday 1 month ago, and I was just thinking like hometown nostalgia, childhood memories, and I've been really craving soft serve ice cream, and all of those things came together into these soft serve socks that are just a like very easy, very beginner friendly colorwork sock pattern of a little soft serve ice cream cones, perfect for different scrappy yarns. Little Neapolitan cuff, again, my classic German short row heel. This is the one where I think you can see look at how clean that line is. 80 stitches, US 1.5 down to a US 1, 2x2 cuff, and my background color is the Cascade Heritage Clear Sky, and then this is the Knit Pick Stroll Cork. This is the Nomad Snowdrift Bear. This is the Cascade Heritage 2-2, and then we also have some Knit Pick Stroll Burnt Umber Heather. We have some Universal Yarn Zesty Sock Nostalgia. We have some Boston Fiber Company BFC. Are there any others that I used? I think that was it. And so these are a free pattern that you can get on my Ravelry. I just didn't want to have to go through the whole tech editing, test knitting. I wanted you to be able to knit these this summer if you wanted to, because they're a very summery sock. So these are the soft serve socks, also known as the ice cream shop socks. Am I ever going to call my patterns their actual names? Maybe. Okay, guys, we are so close to the end. Did anyone guess that we would have this many socks this year? Number 39. These are my Cylon socks. This is a pair of vanilla socks, and it's 72 stitches down to 64. I used a 2x2 rib, US 1 needles. The yarn is Knit Pick Static Cylon. This is my first time using Knit Pick Static, and it is a non-merino, so it's like 75% superwash wool, 25% nylon. So it's not merino, but it is as soft as merino. It's really soft, very smooth. I really liked working with this. I will say, knit this during the Supergirl movie, not quite as non-splitty as the fruits. Like, I was splitting this a lot, trying to do this in a dark movie theater. Not ideal, but smooth, like, to the look and to the touch. And the heel and the toe are Wool to Die For's platinum sock. It was, I can't remember what's the word that people would use. It's like, it was an oopsie from when I was dyeing one of my fishy mini sets, this red color. I ended up with a little bit too much tonal variation. There are some splotches of darker red that I just didn't want to send out. It's not my best quality, so I didn't want to send it out. So I took it for myself and used the little heel in the toe because Cylons are like the androids from Battlestar Galactica, and they have little red laser eyes. So I thought red laser eyes for my Cylon socks. And in my effort to experiment with more different short row heels, I did the no wrap, no gap short row heel. It's linked in the Ravelry notes for these. It's very similar to Stone Knit's short row heel, but I think Stone Knit is a little more intuitive, a little more straightforward. I didn't think that this was written very well, and I didn't like doing it that much, but I'm glad I got to try it. Guys, we're on to the last sock. Did anyone guess? 1, 2, 3, 40 pairs of socks my first year of sock knitting. These are the Can't Feel Alone socks. I basically, while I was promoting these, everyone was obsessed with the anglerfish. A couple people had asked for an all anglerfish version, but mostly people were just being like, I love the anglerfish, the anglerfish. And so I thought it'd be kind of cute to have like a surprise update. Same way, Taylor Swift does her 3am versions, or Noah Kahn has his Last of the Bugs version. It's like a little surprise bonus a week later, which was these Can't Feel Alone socks, named for the iconic Song About an Anglerfish by Hank Green. So I did the first one so that I could write up the pattern and have my like yardage estimates to come out like a week after the main Hidden Depths pattern, but then I procrastinated the second one, so I just finished it a couple of days ago. And so this one, as always, 80 stitches, US 1.5 down to US 1. I did a little contrasting cast on. This is the leftover Wild Violet Fiber Fluorescent Fiber Company from these. I feel like these are like little sisters. I really like looking at them together. And so this one, of course, also used the Cascade Heritage Black. And then the anglerfish is opal in the color silver. And I used some of the leftover fluorescent swatches for the eyes and the lights. And then, as always, my German short row heel. And then I did just have one stand out. I liked the reason I did the duplicate stitch anglerfish on these instead of anglerfish all around was because I really liked the anglerfish standing out and being just on its own. And so even with these, I needed one to stand out. So I just duplicate stitched over one in the Fluorescent Fiber Company. This other sock does not have one duplicate stitched because she's special. And my biggest lesson for these is just how much I hate having half finished objects. Like, not only am I immune to second sock syndrome, I hate being without a second sock. I think it was like 1 month between finishing the first and casting on the second, and I was stressed the whole time, feeling like I had like an unfinished thing on my to-do list. Did not like waiting a while between these. So I'm very happy that now I have both. Okay, so I hope we enjoyed my Soccer Bar 3 parade. There's another celebration because we're doing this Soccer Bar 3 sock parade. We're having Soccer Bar 3 pattern release, but it wouldn't be a true celebration without a little Soccer Bar 3 sale for you. So because it's the conclusion of my 20th year, my 20th birthday, I am going to give all of you 28% off on all my patterns on Ravelry and Etsy with the code SOCCABAR3. And don't worry, the spelling will be in the description. So if you want to get the Rosy Maple Moth sock pattern, now is the perfect time. You can get it for 28% off. And if you want to get the Hidden Depths pattern, including the Can't Feel Alone pattern, also 28% off. And next year there'll be even more patterns to get 29% off of, because next year I'll be turning 29 and then 30. We don't need to think about that one. So if you want to celebrate with me, and if you stuck it out till the end, you're already celebrating with me. But if you want to celebrate with me even more, 28% off all my patterns throughout the month of August. Okay, thank you if you've made it this far. Thank you if you've been supporting my channel, you've been supporting my designs. And if you're new here, welcome. I hope you enjoyed my parade. I hope you'll continue to listen to me yap mostly about socks, but also about some other things I knit. Make sure to wish me happy birthday in the comments. I'm a Leo, so I die without praise. Bye. Yeah, we've got the energy. We've got the energy. I think I look really cute. She knows. Fix decreases, fix decreases, fix decreases. Let me check that for sure. What accent am I even doing? What else? Did I learn lessons from you? Oh my gosh. Someone just bought my pattern. Good day for me. I'm out of refresher, so it's water time. Oh, I just pulled on a float. I hope you're okay, float. My roommate needs to be let in. The order I wrote these down in is crazy. Have so many socks for me. Okay, we've got it. We got something.